Hey Awesomes, how's it going? Welcome to week 14. I hope that you all had a restful, pleasant holiday break. And so we're back. We've got basically 2 to 3 weeks left to go. So thought I would talk a little bit about this week and talk more about your draft for Project 3C. Let's do this Friday. So let's get started and look at this week real quick. Primarily going to spend time talking about Project 3C in this particular video, but there are 3 readings right here. They're relatively short, talking about performance reviews, which is your Project 5, or is it Project 4? I guess Project 4, excuse me. Yeah, Project 3 ABC, Project 4. And so I'll talk a little bit more about these readings here in a video coming out tomorrow, which I'll also talk about Project 4, the performance review, or as we also call it, the reflective memo. So there's these readings here. Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about those tomorrow in video. Primarily, I really want to kind of concentrate on the draft of your research report that is due, Project 3C, and then we'll talk about the feedback as well. All right. So there's no annotated bibliography due this week. There's no postings as far as blogging is concerned on the course website or anything, or responses due. Rather, we're going to pretty much use the rest of our time in this class to get done with our projects. So let's go to projects here. Let's talk about Project 3C, your research report. I specifically want to talk to you a little bit about formatting. I think that a lot of the feedback that I provided with you for you in projects 3A and 3B helped you think a little bit about, as far at least some of the content. We'll address some content as well. So we've got this, we're talking about the report. You guys are writing these in teams, right? We're not necessarily answering the problem per se as much as providing either recommendations, right? We're doing a recommendation report. Even if we're providing some sort of a proposal report or an informational report, a certain part of that may have either a suggestion or a recommendation part of it. So let's look down here at the minimum requirements. Document length 16 to 23 pages, of which 12 and 16 are substantive, right? Meaning that your front matter and the back matter here comprise your 16 to 23 pages. 12 to 16 would be right here in the body, with your introduction, your findings, and your conclusion / discussion, and even the graphical content. Okay. So we have the front matter. I'd like to see a cover page, a table of contents page, a table of figures, or as Markel refers to it, a list of illustrations. Either one is really fine with me. And then you have the executive summary, all right, and that kind of makes up the first, we'll call it the first 4 or 5 pages here. And I'm going to show you an example in a moment. The body then, right, you'd have an introduction, sets up the issue with which you are dealing with, right, maybe provide some research that kind of grounds, that is where you kind of like really set up your ethos. Then your findings, we'll look at the sample that I've got here that will also talk about, maybe you would think about your methods and results, kind of what you did, how many people did you survey perhaps, what kind of questions did you ask, you did a survey, you did interviews, primary research, secondary research, etc. And then, so that would kind of be your methods, and then you also discuss what results you had, right? Those would be your findings, right? And I'm loosely referring to, as I'm talking to you here, we got kind of the basics of what we kind of want to see here. And then we got kind of like an expanded view on page 348 of our text. Page 348, it's table 13.1. It is the elements of a typical report. You got front matter, body, and then the back matter as well. And so in your findings, then you have your conclusion or your discussion. And in your conclusion, your discussion, that is where you would probably, you might make recommendations or suggestions. If you're proposing something, this is where you might make the actual official proposal of what should be done, right? Or we might call that a recommendation. And if you're, let's say you're doing an informational report, that is where you also might suggest and even make some recommendations based on the information that you have found, if that makes sense. And I make a note here. I received a few emails about graphical content. This is not a separate section. It's just more of it should be more of a reminder that within perhaps the section, I would say mostly probably your finding sections or your conclusion is where you might know your results. Results probably be your best bet as far as a natural place where you might have some graphical content, right, or tables or figures. And then your back matter, obviously you should have references, right, the people that you interviewed, right, if you did a one-on-one interview with people, perhaps, especially those maybe in a position of authority, you might, if you're going to quote from them or refer to them, you'd want to do that. Then you would also have your secondary research, right, articles, books, particular websites maybe that you used. And then in appendices, this says optional. If you did surveys and you did interviews, this would be a great location to add what were the questions. If you did a Qualtrics or you did a SurveyMonkey or you did something like that, this would be a good place to perhaps include the link maybe to the survey if it's still available, or at least you might put those list of questions that you asked your survey respondents. You might put the list of questions that you asked those that you interviewed. And this would be a great place for that. Optional index. I don't know if there would be necessarily unless you have an index of something. But those are the three main items right there. So again, I kind of reiterate: total document length 16 to 23, 12 to 16 are substantial, and the 12 to 16 really come in with your body and your graphics right there. So we got the peer review date by this Friday. In other words, just post. This will be on Blackboard. Similarly, as we did the peer review for the Project 1A, the resume and cover letter. So we'll have a section in there be like a discussion board post, and I'll have that link for you in the next day or so. And then, of course, we've got the rubric. So let's look at a quick sample here. All right, so here's a cover page, right? Again, don't forget we're employing the hierarchy, things that we've learned throughout this semester, where we have a sans serif font. Then we'd have the date, that this is whatever type of report you are doing. And then you would reiterate your title right here, the date, and then your research team, and then you would list the names of the people on your team vertically right here. Alphabetical order is fine. And then you would have your table of contents. And so I kind of began to, if this was I just made up some stuff here real quick. So you got an introduction, have your dots going across there. Page 1, your method is maybe starts on page 4. You got your results and discussion, or aka your findings perhaps, right? You have your conclusion, maybe your main issues. You may have a recommendation section. Then obviously you'd have your reference and your appendix, and of course obviously you would continue those with how those, whatever those page numbers end up being, if that makes sense. So you would have your list of illustrations. This could easily be titled list of figures. If you draw really, really heavily on Markel, he would say it's a list of illustrations, and you could break those up into and then you could break those up into even further if you wanted to do with figures and tables if you had both. So that will largely depend on what you and your group, what your team has come up with. Then you have your executive summary, right? 1 page, all right? Then your introduction, right? This is generally when you would, at this point, you'd actually go from the Roman numeral system to the regular system there, number 1. Then you'd have maybe your method, collection data, region covered, whatever other subheadings that you would want to have. And again, notice the hierarchy that we have here in place. And then you may have your results and discussion, some discuss something here about the results. You may have whatever your subtopics are. You have your conclusion, right? Main issues, maybe is one subheading. Then you might have some recommendations. You may have some subheadings there. Notice that each one of these is also starting on its own page. You have your list of references, and then finally any appendix or appendices. Here's an example of an efficiency survey and a safety survey that this particular group had done. So that's kind of it in a nutshell as far as ways to think about it. In each one of those pages, as you'll notice also, as this corroborates also in Markel's text, at each of your sections will begin on its own page. So, and then you can use this table of contents kind of as an idea. And you can use some of the things that even Markel talks about in his text, depending on the type of report that you're doing specifically, to help inform you what that looks like, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's it basically. Thinking about Project 3C this week. Begin writing on that. Be focused on that this week. I'll be back, like I said, probably tomorrow with a video talking about performance reviews, and those are for the readings. So there's nothing pressing or anything like that with those this week, except that assignment's coming up due in a couple of weeks, and so I wanted to provide you with some background information, and then we'll go over that assignment further. All right, my fine, awesome people, have a great week. Please do let me know if there's more that I can do for you. I'm here all week. Bye.